Thanks for taking the time to watch this. My reflection this week is entitled Successful Marriage. Experience tells us that when two people get married, they immediately begin to discover just how different they are. I think the fact is we don't really begin to know ourselves until we get into a marriage relationship because we live too close to ourselves. It really does take someone else to help us see ourselves for who we really are. I think one of the fringe benefits of a good marriage is that you acquire a built-in psychiatrist, because a good spouse is someone who's going to care enough to listen, and the benefit is that you don't have to pay for it. But in many emotional illnesses, it's a result of a person having some inner burden weighing on them, which they can't really share with someone else. And so in a good marriage, a husband and a wife can share those burdens with each other. And that sharing should be without reservation, without having to worry about what the other person is going to think or how the other person is going to react, without having to keep up a front. But a marriage is also not a missionary enterprise, right? It has enough problems and difficulties of its own without each partner trying to thoroughly change or remake the other one. In fact, true love doesn't force itself on anyone. True love does not force change. It evokes growth by accepting your spouse as she is, as he is. When we get married, we don't sign up to change the other person. We agree to love them as they are. And so the best thing that a husband can do to change his wife is to change himself, to correct his own faults. The best thing that a wife can do to change her husband is to change herself, to correct her own faults. And that's in keeping with the teachings of Jesus to his followers. And something else I want to say is that we often think, when it comes to disloyalty and being unfaithful, very often in a marriage, we think that that's when a spouse has committed adultery. But the fact is, we can be disloyal and unfaithful to our spouse by simply putting work or our parents or the sport that we play or our hobbies ahead of our spouse. That too is disloyalty. Anyone who's not ready to place their spouse ahead of their career, ahead of their parents, ahead of their friends, ahead of their recreation, if you can't do that, you're going to be in for a challenging marriage. Your marriage might even fail. Because marriage is for adults. It's not for children. It's like if you put the first button into the first hole of your shirt, all the other buttons will fall into their proper place. But if that first button is put into the second hole on the shirt, then nothing's going to come out right. And so it's a matter of putting first things in first place, keeping priorities straight. This is important for marriage, right? Husbands, if you put your wives first, and wives, if you put your husbands first, then everything else is going to fall into its proper place in the marriage relationship. I want to share with you, just as I round this off, some characteristics that I believe are really important to a successful marriage, in my view. And the first is praise. I think this is so important for a successful marriage. No marriage can prosper if there is no praise. Everyone in life needs to be appreciated at some point by someone. And nothing can kill love faster than continual criticism. When husbands and wives praise each other in small ways and in big ways, they're saying to one another, I love you, I value you. And so praise nurtures a good marriage. And I think it's one of the characteristics that is lacking in many modern marriages. So praise, I think, is really important for a successful marriage. The second one is forgiveness. Forgiveness is essential for a happy marriage. If couples ask me, do you think our marriage is going to survive? Do you think we've got any hope here? My answer is yes, providing that you're willing to forgive each other. And, it's not the level of forgiveness that comes after a major crisis. It's that everyday forgiveness, every single day in a successful marriage where a husband and a wife are constantly asking for forgiveness from each other. Because when we don't do that, wounds don't get healed. A husband and a wife are in danger of growing apart from each other. You grow cold towards one another. And you don't obtain the blessings that God will send down on a husband and wife who mutually forgive one another. So praise, forgiveness, and then I think time is so important to a successful marriage. A successful marriage takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. It's got to grow. And that can be sometimes a long and maybe even difficult process. But like all good things in life, it comes through effort and struggle. Those of you who are not married, maybe some of you are thinking about getting married, you need to remember this time, because we live in a society, we live in a world of instantaneous gratification. We want what we want and when we want it, and that when is now. And so if that level of impatience creeps into a marriage, it can be very, very destructive. If we don't have patience with each other, if we're not willing to give the years that are required to working out a successful marriage, then the chances of that marriage lasting the distance are not so good. So praise, forgiveness, and time. And listen, no marriage is so good that it cannot be better. And no marriage is so bad that it cannot be improved, provided that the parties, the persons involved, are willing to grow together by God's grace towards maturity in Christ, who came not to be served, but to serve. And lastly, an essential requirement for a good marriage is the capacity to grow up. To grow up. Emotional immaturity is one of the greatest causes of failure in a marriage. And of course, we all come to marriage with our private assortment of immaturities and hang-ups, but we've got to learn to outgrow them. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 13, he says, "When I was a child, I thought as a child. I spoke as a child. I understood as a child," Paul says. "But when I became a man, I put away childish things." How essential is that to a happy marriage? To put away childish things. Irresponsibility, insisting on getting your own way, egotism, lack of empathy, temper tantrums, jealousy. How important is it every day to pray, "God, help me to grow. Help me to look beyond myself, to realize the needs and feelings of my wife or my husband, and accept the responsibility that you've laid on me." May God bless you and keep you.